My name is James, and I'm 28 years old. I've always been intrigued by things people can't explain, the odd, the eerie, the supernatural. But I never thought I'd find myself living through something that would shake me to my core. It was supposed to be a simple getaway, just me in a rented cabin in the quiet woods of Silverado Canyon in Orange County. A weekend to unwind, to escape the constant noise of city life. But those woods had other plans for me. If you ever hear whistling in the woods, 3 distinct notes, don't follow it. Don't even acknowledge it. Just leave. Because I didn't, and I'll never forget what happened. The drive to Silverado Canyon was uneventful, at least at first. I left Irvine in the late afternoon, the city's bustling streets giving way to winding canyon roads. As I descended deeper into the canyon, the scenery changed dramatically. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The further I drove, the quieter it became. The road narrowed, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under my tires. Occasionally, I'd pass an old house or an abandoned shed, their broken windows staring out like hollow eyes. Finally, I reached the cabin. It sat at the end of a dirt path, surrounded by dense woods. The structure looked as though it had been there for a century. Peeling green paint, a sagging roof, and ivy creeping up one side. The air was still, and the only sound was the distant rustling of leaves. Inside, the cabin was small and utilitarian. The living room had a stone fireplace, a worn leather couch, and a coffee table with deep scratches on its surface. Above the fireplace hung an old map of Silverado Canyon, yellowed with age and marked with faded red circles. A dusty bookshelf in the corner held a mix of novels, guidebooks, and local history texts. The kitchen was outdated, with an old gas stove and mismatched utensils scattered across the counters. In one of the drawers, I found a rusted hunting knife and a notebook filled with sketches of trees, rocks, and what looked like symbols carved into wood. I checked the bedroom. It had a single bed with a lumpy mattress and a window that looked out into the forest. A thin layer of grime coated the glass, distorting the view. Something about the cabin felt off. It wasn't just the age, it was the atmosphere, the way the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. That first night, I sat on the porch, a beer in hand, watching the sun set behind the trees. The forest was alive with sound, crickets chirping, the occasional rustle of leaves, and the faint hoot of an owl. But as the night deepened, the forest grew unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. And then I heard it, a faint whistle, 3 distinct notes, deliberate and melodic. The sound came from deep in the woods, far enough away that I couldn't pinpoint its source. I froze, the beer halfway to my lips, straining to hear. When the whistle didn't repeat, I told myself it was nothing, maybe the wind or an animal. But deep down, I felt uneasy. I locked the doors and windows before going to bed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there. The next morning, I drove into Irvine to stock up on supplies. At the market, the cashier seemed friendly enough until I casually mentioned hearing a whistle in the woods. Her smile faded instantly. "You heard it? 3 notes?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Yeah, what is it? An animal or something?" She hesitated, glancing around nervously. "People around here call it the Whistler. It's an old story. Miners used to hear it back in the 1800s, and they said it was a warning. Those who followed it, well, they never came back." I laughed awkwardly. "So, what happens if you don't follow it?" She shrugged. "Most people say it's harmless if you leave it alone. But don't go looking for it. That's when things get bad." Her tone left me unsettled, but I told myself it was just a local legend. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, the whistle came again. This time, it was louder, closer. 3 notes, deliberate and haunting. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the trees. The forest was still, the air heavy with an unnatural quiet. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer. The whistle came again, this time from a different direction. My chest tightened, and I retreated into the cabin, locking the door behind me. On the third night, curiosity got the better of me. When the whistle came, I decided to follow it. The forest was dense, the ground littered with leaves and twigs that crunched beneath my boots. The air was damp and cold, and the flashlight's beam barely penetrated the thick shadows. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled into a clearing. In the center was an old wooden bench, its surface covered in moss. Beside it was a strange pile of rocks, stacked in an uneven tower. On the bench, I found a notebook. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with frantic scribbles. The whistling won't stop. It's watching me. Don't follow it. The final page was smeared with something dark, and the handwriting trailed off mid-sentence. That's when I saw it. A pale figure stood at the edge of the clearing, its body impossibly thin and its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its skin was almost translucent, and its limbs moved jerkily, like a marionette. The whistle came again, but the figure's lips didn't move. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The figure began to move, stepping forward with unnatural, jerky movements. I turned and ran, the whistle echoing behind me, louder and more chaotic. I burst into the cabin, slamming the door shut and locking it. My chest heaved as I backed into the corner, clutching the rusty hunting knife I'd found earlier. The whistle stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. At first light, I packed my things and left. As I drove down the canyon road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Standing at the edge of the forest was the pale figure, watching me leave. Back home, I couldn't stop researching the legend of the Whistler. Every account I found ended the same way, with the listener leaving the woods and never returning. If you ever hear whistling in the woods, 3 distinct notes, don't follow it. Don't even acknowledge it. Just leave, because I didn't, and I'll never forget what happened.